Super Rugby Week 10 has come and gone with the Easter long weekend. Our sport editor Garen and chief writer Rob are joining me in studio to let us know if their predictions were spot on. Guys,
morning Jen.
How was your weekend?
Hi Jen. Not too bad at all. I spent it running a little bit in the two oceans, but
yes.
Otherwise all good.
Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you very much.
You're welcome. How was your weekend, Rob?
I didn't run it. Of course, I was working, you see. I had to watch a lot of Super Rugby, and I've got to say I didn't enjoy all of it.
All right. Why don't you take me through the first game?
Okay, so the first game was the Bulls' third game on tour. They were up against the Waratahs in Sydney, and both Rob and I correctly predicted last week that they would lose. And they did lose by 7 points, so they picked up a losing bonus point, so it wasn't the end of the world. And they were fairly competitive at times in the game, but I think as Rob and I said, the Waratahs would just be a little bit too smart for them. They were going to be a little bit streetwise. At home in Sydney. Again, the home team seemed to be like the dominant teams in this year's competition. So the Bulls licking a few of their wounds, if you like, picking up a few injuries. Their skipper, Flip Merv, has now been cited after the game, so waiting to hear whether he'll be out for their final game against the Force next weekend. They've lost their scrum half, Piet van Zyl, for the week, so not looking fantastic for the Bulls. They're slipping down the order. They're still the second best South African team, but they're ninth, I think, Rob, in the overall standings.
Wow.
So that tells a little story in itself for the South African teams, that the Sharks are top of the log, but the next best team is only 9th out of 16. Yeah. So not great at all from an overall South African point of view. But the Bulls, I think they're looking forward to getting back home already, even though they've got a pretty tough match in their final match against the Force, who have done really, really well to date in the Australian Conference. So not a great result, but as we sort of predicted.
Well, congratulations both of you on predicting correctly. Rob, do you have anything to add?
I must say, Jen, when I watched the game early on, Israel Folau sort of ghosted through a big hole to score a try very early on in the game, and that was 7-0 Waratahs. And that's the sort of instance where often, as you know, Garen, a touring team, it's the kind of thing that can demoralise a side very quickly. The one thing you can say to the Bulls' credit was that it didn't. They actually did sort of somehow claw themselves back into what wasn't a particularly high-quality game in the end. I did think that their old stalwart Jacques Potgieter, for his sins, had a very good game against them, because, as you know, he now plays for the Waratahs, and he put up a real sort of blood and thunder performance, clearly wanting to sort of make his mark against his former franchise, presumably knowing a few of their secrets as well. And he had a really good game, and he sort of really piled into the collisions. The Bulls again were badly let down at the breakdown, where, as we said before the weekend, they were going to miss having a specialist open side flank. I still cannot understand why they haven't made any emergency measures to recruit from somewhere. There must be an open side flank somewhere that they can pick up, and they didn't. And now they really have to win that last tour game against the Force, I think, if they're going to stay in contention for the playoffs.
All right, well, the next two games were derbies, so South African winners there.
Yeah.
Karen, why don't you take me through the second game?
Well, that was the only good thing about the two matches in South Africa. Two of the worst matches I think I've ever seen played. They really put you to sleep. So the first game was in Durban. It was the Sharks at the top of the table against the Cheetahs, who are now bottom of the South African Conference, having lost. So the Sharks, again, they haven't put in an 80-minute performance all season. I thought this was the game. They know the Cheetahs fairly well, but it was so ho-hum, Rob. I think I nodded off a couple of times during the game. So the Sharks, they're top of the South African Conference and they're top of the overall conference, but they certainly don't look like tournament winners to me at this stage. There's something that is going to have to click a little bit, more so in the coming weeks for them to sort of be out and out favourites. They had Tim Sweel at fly-off, I think, struggled a little bit. He struggled with his kicking. He looked a bit nervous. You got Francois Steyn sort of bailing them out at times. I don't know how long that's going to last. Picking up a few key injuries, there and everywhere. Jake White, I'm not too sure. He said you can win ugly, and you pick up the points. It's not the end of the world. But I think secretly back at the ranch, he's a little bit worried as well. He's got a fantastic team on paper, but they just don't seem to be performing week in, week out. And they've got this amazing draw this year. I don't know what they did right to get so many home matches before they even have to tour. So they're banking all these points. They have extended their lead in the South African Conference as everyone else is losing behind them. So they're sure winners of the South African Conference, already after, I think, week 10. So I'm not sure if that's, it's sort of like masking how well they're really playing. We'll have a better idea, I think, when they actually go on tour after this coming weekend. So, not a great game. The Sharks, the Cheetahs were pretty woeful. They deserve, I think, their bottom of the log position, which is a far cry from last season when they were really, really impressive. So they've certainly gone backwards, as have a lot of the South African teams. So the Sharks picked up the 4 points. The Cheetahs missed out completely. So, not a great advertisement for South African rugby at all.
Rob, do you have anything to add, or should we just move on?
Well, Jen, the one thing I will say, I'm trying to put a positive spin on things.
Oh, good.
Was that
Silly, man.
I think what the Sharks probably did on the day was that they realised it was going to be one of those rough and attritional sort of South African derbies, and that there wasn't going to be a bonus point involved. So they kind of, I think mentally, maybe they just sort of switched off the bonus point aspect, Garen, and just thought, let's just win this game, let's just get the 4 points. And as you know, it's kind of, they always talk about the old cliche of Super Rugby now being a marathon, not a sprint. So I think in their minds, they were thinking, we need to still conserve something because we've still got a tour, because we've still got another home game before we even go on tour. So I think they kind of almost switched off mentally, but just did enough to win the game. And so what I'm hoping is that perhaps that while playing badly, they are still winning, and that little sort of trough that they've hit is now going to be sort of followed by an uphill curve when it really, really matters. But if you looked at the calibre of their display on Saturday, you'd have to say they didn't look like title challengers. But Jake White is a very canny individual, and I think he'll still have something up his sleeve. I think he will manage to get the guys fired up, especially for the tour part. But we'll have to wait and see.
I like that optimism.
He's in denial.
All right, Garen, why don't you take us to the third game?
Okay, the third game was at Newlands. Yeah, the Storm was up against the Lions. And, in the first 40 minutes, the Stormers looked really good. It was their best 40 minutes, I think, of the whole tournament to date. But the second half, they didn't score a single point. So that sort of summed up their season. They were really good and really average. So they picked up 2 tries, which I think boosted the average, because I don't think they've scored more than 2 tries this season. So, the 22,000, I think, that turned up at Newlands, which is not a bad crowd for an Easter Saturday, would have been really enthused by the first 40. But then again, would have left the stadium thinking, same old Stormers. So they won 18 points to 3 at the end. The Lions actually won the second half. I think it was a 3-0. Yeah. But so, the Stormers, moved off the bottom of the overall conference. They're now in 14th spot. Yes. Oh the good news is I still think they're going to finish ahead of the Lions, at least third. They might even challenge the Bulls, depending on how the final matches pan out. The Stormers, now having come back from their tour, have got a lot of home matches where, again, as we've said many times, the home team seems to have the upper hand in all these matches. Got a lot of South African derbies coming up as well. There could be spoilers, unfortunately, for like the Sharks and the Bulls. So we'll see how it pans out. But a lot of pressure on the management down in Cape Town. The match didn't have much to write about. There were a couple of fairly fortuitous tries, but nothing that was really well worked. A quick tap penalty and they scored. Not the sort of thing they'll do in day out. They're not sort of, going through the phases and setting up anything, for the back line to finish off. So not great times down in Cape Town. But it's only up for the Stormers. That's the good news.
We say that every week.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with you. I think it is probably only up for the Stormers, Jen, just because they've got quite a nice run now of as we know, all their games are on South African soil, and quite a few of them still at Newlands. So they will be expecting to climb a few positions on the overall table for the relatively little that will probably matter. But the team that worry me now is the Lions, actually, because that defeat for them was their third on the trot, and I don't think they've picked up a single point, not even a losing bonus point in any of the last 3 matches. If I'm open to correction, but I think that they're 0 out of 15 from their last 3 matches, which of course means that they're now falling at a rate of knots, and they've still got to tour. So the Lions up against it. They're also getting lots of injuries, and considering that they didn't have a particularly highly rated squad at the outset, that's really affecting them now. They haven't really got quality coming in from underneath to sort of pick them up when it's needed. So I'm afraid I see hardship for them on the road as well, and I'm afraid now I've gone back into a negative mindset as well. So sorry to spoil the vibrant mood.
All right. Well, on that note, were there any notable players this weekend?
Okay, in the sort of the main game, if you like, at Newlands, I thought Deon Fourie put up a really tigerish performance. He sort of skirted the boundaries of legality a little bit in terms of irking the referee, getting penalised, getting yellow carded for a really stupid barge off the ball. I see Alistair Coetzee has been talking about speaking to the referee about some of their indiscipline. I mean, I don't know whether he needs to speak to the referee or just to his players, because that was a really daft incident. But otherwise, I thought Dion Fourie played really well. In the Sharks game, again, Frans Steyn produced a good game, considering that he's apparently nursing a couple of niggles.
Injuries, yeah.
So he's apparently got 2 bad knees, which is a bit of a concern going forward. But again, just his experience and calmness in the back line, I thought played a big role in the Sharks getting over the line. So those are the sort of players that I think perhaps stood up well over the weekend.
All right, great. So if anyone has any photos from this weekend, how can they share them with us and challenge your predictions
Sure.
next weekend?
If you were at the game in Durban or in Cape Town, please send us your pictures. You know, we've got a gallery up on sport24.co.za. We'd love to include your pictures. And if you did well in Super Rugby this weekend, come check how we did. We were pretty proud of ourselves. Let's see how you did in comparison.